Yeah.
So normally what you would experience when you go to the bank is that, you're supposed to be giving, say, cedis. But the bank sometimes would ask you whether you want it in dollars or you want it in cedis. Now, also in this country, and Adongo makes the point that we actually spend in cedis. We spend cedis here. And so normally before you're giving dollars, the bank would ask, and sometimes they would ask what it is that you intend to use this for. Some of the banks actually would do the transfer on your behalf. And the view is that they want to make sure that you're able to, they want to prevent people getting dollars and selling it to the black market, getting profits, and then pretending to actually use it on external travels. So if you can justify, for instance, if you say, oh, okay, so I need dollars to pay for some imports here or there, well, the banks can do the transactions for you. The bank would do that. But let's say I'm traveling and I'd need, say, $1,000 as spending money. Sometimes even the bank would say, well, how about we give you a card that you can go. That is what is expected to be done. Unfortunately, that is not what is being done. So what I get Adongo saying is more of an enforcement of the current principle or of the current directive. Now, I've also heard Dr. Sedop make the point that, this could affect, look, Kojo Boateng says that people are comparing black market rate. It's simply this. The moment the cedi appreciates against the dollar, people would want to get dollars as a store of value. They can't get dollars from, say, maybe the banks easily, because you need to justify why is it that you want dollars, unless you actually have a friend within the banking system who can cut a few corners and give it to you.
Basically break the rules.
Yes, but Alaji is always willing to give you the dollars. But the moment, and the principles of demand and supply, at the moment there's a huge demand for it, Alaji says, oh, get it. Because you see, here we are talking about the fact that this is because the dollar is weakened. And I hear people saying, how about the pound sterling? Well, the pound sterling is also struggling. Oh, but the Nigerians are not experiencing, say, well, the Naira may also have a problem. But the end point is that there is the general expectation, now that Donald Trump is talking about, some bit of a compromise between US and China. If the US dollar rises again, then the cedi may depreciate. And so why don't I get some dollars? Okay, and I've seen people calling me and saying, oh, I pay my son's school fees in dollars. The school has a rate, so I prefer to keep dollars. So what many of these people do is actually to buy from the Forex Bureau. Even the Forex Bureau, you'd have to go with your Ghana card and sometimes give indication of what it is that you're going to use it for. But trust me, the moment the cedi begins to appreciate, there are people who are going to start asking for dollars. And the moment they begin to start asking for dollars, if the demand for the dollar is high, particularly within the black market, the rate within that market would go up. If it is extended to, say, the formal market, that would also lead it to rise if we do not have enough supplies to meet that. But you see, it's also important, and I was just checking our trade statistics over the period. I have the 2023 data from the Ghana Statistical Service, and they'll give you the values. They give it to you in cities, but just for purpose of analysis, you'd realize that between February to March to April and May, Ghana's highest imports is around November and December
for Christmas.
It is around this time that you need more dollars.
That's why S&P's prediction that the depreciation, the appreciation we are seeing may not last till the end of the year.
Because also in 2023, for instance, somewhere around August, we saw our import value of increasing from 14.9 billion in July to 16.5, and 16.5 billion in dollars was the highest throughout the previous months, as in the first 7 months of the year. The point I make also is that it is true that today we have more dollars in the system. It is true that the price of gold on the world market is increased. It is also true that we have increased our production or an export of gold in this country. All of these would contribute. It is also true that there are external factors. So yes, that's it mainly, but the reality also is that when you go to the bank to go and take dollars, they ask you, do you want it in cedis or do you want it in dollars? So an enforcement of the regulation is key.
There was some controversy, confusion, a bit of a debate between Evans and Isaac Atongo about what the existing law is or the existing regulation is. All right. Isaac Adomo, of course, was suggesting that currently you can't go to your bank and withdraw dollars. I want us to listen to them, and then we'll seek some clarification. All right, stay. Listen to this. 30 seconds.
You can no longer speculate with a bank account in dollars, because when you put the money in dollars into a bank account, we'll give you the dollars only when you need it for a dollar-denominated transaction outside of our country, because dollars must be spent outside, not inside. But if you need the dollar to go and spend on, say, CD-denominated transaction, we'll give you the CDs.
But this is theory.
That is what's happening. Go and put your money in your bank account and go and get it, whether you get a dollar in Ghana here.
I go to the bank all the time to take
and
my
you,
dollars
and you
out.
take dollars?
Then nobody asks me.
It's illegal. You can't be giving dollars on the counter.
All right, so you hear Isaac Adongo say that it is illegal. You can't be given dollars on the counter. Okay, now Winston is giving some clarity here that actually the rules are to restrict the issue of dollars over the counter, right? For good reason. So they ought to ask you several questions before they give you dollars. And in fact, if there is an alternative to the dollars, they should offer that to you. So either they offer you CDs, or if you say you're traveling, maybe they offer you a card, like a Visa card, with your dollars loaded on it so that you go and spend it outside. But for them to actually give you the hard currency, it ought not be the rule. So is Adongo right when he says it's illegal?
Well, Evans makes the point that it's just in theory, and said that even for him, when he goes to the bank, he's able to withdraw his dollars over the counter. I would have thought that at a certain amount, a threshold, then they do not give it to you over the counter, and a minimum you can at least withdraw over the counter, which I have done before. Now I'm afraid whether I would be arrested.
The question is, and I suspect everybody has done this before, right? I suspect everyone has had this experience before. The question is it illegal?
Well, if there's regulation to say that this is how you do it, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I bought some machines recently. I was buying these machines from China, so I go to my bank and they transfer the money from my dollar account to where I'm buying it from, right? They don't give me the dollars to find a way to transfer. So I had to go there and transfer that money. Now I also needed some money to do some local purchases because I'm buying from here. They gave me cedis, right? I think Adongo's point is that if you need legal tender for business and you have a dollar account and you're doing that business in Ghana, the legal tender is cedis, so the banks will give you cedis. If you need it for any dollar denominated transaction, which mostly would be outside the country, that you have to give the justification, and then the right process will be used, whether it's transferred to wherever you are going or that the currency is given to you, especially if you are traveling. You can have that. One other thing that is also key is what Winston mentioned. The more people don't trust the system to keep the currency stable, the more they see this appreciation as an opportunity to buy more dollars, because they think that in the next few months or by end of year the CD would have depreciated. So if you buy more dollars now, it will give you value.
You make a profit.
And if that happens and there's a rush on the dollar, then there's a rush on our forex stability, and then we will lose the gains we are making. So those are some of the considerations.
So, I mean, if I remember right, Kwesi Mr. Arthur, as governor of the Bank of Ghana at the time, set the limit at $10,000. And in fact, when he actually appeared before the appointments committee, having been nominated by John Mahama as his vice president, he justified that. He makes the point that, you know, in many countries, when you go there, you're going to withdraw money. What you're told is that you're giving the equivalent. So there is that regulation in the country, okay, when it comes to withdrawing beyond $10,000.
So that was 6th February 2014. We defended our decision to limit that, because this is a story from the BBC.
Exactly.
And it says foreign currency account holders have been limited to withdrawals of $10,000, which must be supported by evidence of an overseas trip. And the Bank of Ghana governor then, Kofi Wampa, also raised interest rates then to 18% to attract more investment. So these are some of those.
So basically what we are learning this morning is that dollar accounts in the banking system were not created to save dollars for customers. They were created to retrieve dollars from customers.
Not necessarily. They were created to enable transactions for customers. Because if you run a business and you do a lot of imports, for example, or exports, you'd want to receive dollars into a dollar account to enable you to do that part of the business. If you are just doing...
I'm talking about the dollar hard currency, not the value of it. The currency, the dollar.
It's actually, I mean, the creation of it, I mean, I could create a dollar account by way of storing my value, not necessarily retrieving it for the state. But for me, the most important thing is that because I know that there may be times that the CD may depreciate, if I have it in dollars, whenever I need to transact in dollars, I don't need to go buy CDs maybe at a very higher price. So I could just keep it in dollars as and when I need it. But George Riafe is here. You know, we've told you about the interview with the governor tonight. Mm-hmm. But he has information on that directive that Isaac Adongo put out.
George has a look of concern in his eyes.
I think that, Kojo, we should not forget the fact that Bank of Ghana, when it comes to the FS regulations, there are a lot of regulations on the books. As in Bank of Ghana enforcing those regulations, is the word to the letter or whatever the letter, it's another thing altogether. So let us not confuse the fact that these regulations are there. That as we speak right now, is the Bank of Ghana enforcing any FX regulation with respect to the amount of dollars or FX you can withdraw over the counter? It is not true. As far as we have picked up from the Bank of Ghana, there is no directive to commercial banks that if Kojo today you have about $15,000 in your account, and for whatever reason you are supposed to pay your child's fees in an international school, and you walk to the bank that you want to withdraw X amount of money from your account, the commercial bank will not stop you. The only advice is that because sometimes you may be looking for a large amount of FX, you may just give prior notice to the commercial bank that I am coming for X amount of money, so help me that. The bank would not refuse you for getting access to your account. And the Bank of Ghana, as far as communication and directive, has not told the commercial bank that limits the amount of FX that anyone can withdraw from the commercial banks. Later this morning, the Bank of Ghana will issue a statement just to clarify all these things. Now, could you don't forget that in the past or some months ago, as part of the Bank of Ghana's plan to try and check inflation and all the rest, if a commercial bank is holding a lot of dollars, they ask that bank to again provide cover for that dollars or FX in cedis. That made it a little bit expensive for any commercial bank to hold dollars. So you found out that the commercial banks themselves were trying to do certain things to discourage you from depositing dollars in your account. So you have someone maybe Kojo Boati may have like sometimes maybe $200,000 in his account, and he is not even transacting the account in terms of maybe exports and all those things. So it became expensive for some of the commercial banks, and now they were trying to find ways to discourage people from opening account, which sometimes you go and then they will lie to you that, oh, we are now not this and all those things. But just to put that on record, that the Bank of Ghana is not going to do that as far as you're concerned with respect to what is happening.
All right. I mean, okay. But again, if the regulation already exists, if that is what the regulation already says, that if you are going for dollars, you should be offered alternatives, then is this not the Bank of Ghana simply saying, oh, we haven't yet decided to enforce our regulations, you can continue?
Could you? I don't know I don't know the fine print of that. The fine print or the text or the regulation, as in the exact text of that regulation. But just like even quoting prices in dollars locally, it is not allowed. Is the Bank of Ghana in town announcing everybody that, you know, sometimes you also want to monitor development on the market and how in a subtle way you enforce this. But the issue here is now that BoG had communicated that XYZ. The clarity we can authoritatively say based on what we have picked up is that is not true.
Right.
So anybody out there, some of the banks have already said they've had some calls and pressure from their depositors trying to withdraw.
So the Bank of Ghana is distancing itself from what its board member has said.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that is not a decision coming from the board and a decision coming from, and just like what it was said yesterday in that interview, such directives, first there will be an informal engagement to the commercial banks, and in such things you're looking at the board or the governor of the Bank of Ghana, who is now Dr. Johnson Esiama, who has not issued any directive to the banking supervision of the Bank of Ghana to be followed through to the commercial banks that do ABCD.
Okay. Clear as mud.
So in also trying to manage this pressure as well, they have tried to release some supplies to the commercial bank, to the banking department, to ensure that some of the depositors who are already making calls that, listen, if you are not going to allow me to withdraw my money, then I'm going to close my account. But the assurance is that it is not on the table.
Well, I mean, to be very honest with you, I think what the Bank of Ghana is trying to do, and rightly so, is to manage the panic.
Which is already feeding into the system.
Yes, because you see, Kojo, the truth is that what Isaac Adongo said, and I mean, these regulations have been there, George. I mean, we've all talked about these regulations. But of course, if the Bank of Ghana doesn't say anything about, oh, you hold on, when people decide to, because the banks have been managing the situation. You go in there, you're able to justify, then they give you the dollars, because you also would need people's dollars to ensure that you're able to deal with the current appreciation of the Ghana cedi. If they all take it out of the system and you do not have much and they keep it in their bedrooms, in times past, you've actually asked people to release these dollars. So I can understand where the Bank of Ghana is coming from. But the reality also is that sometimes you go to the bank, there are some banks that actually insist on giving you Ghana cedis. Yes, some banks insist on giving you Ghana cedis. So that's really the situation.
But that is not a directive that is coming from the Bank of Ghana to that. And that's just what we need to
if you're not able to
You're
justify,
suggesting that the directive already exists.
if you're not able to justify, the banks will give you cedis.
Yeah.
They'll give you the cedis.
Anyway,